Transformation has to come first. Then, without inhibition, without fighting with sex, without condemning sex, a transformation comes on its own. But it does not come by celibacy. It comes by meditation. It does not come by repression. It comes by a loving atmosphere. Osho, an Indian philosopher. And thank you for joining us for our 16th episode of Sex, Drugs, and Spirituality as we discuss sexual abstinence for mind, body, spirit development. But before we dive into our main topic, allow us to introduce ourselves.
As always, I'm Jackie Lyons of Akashic Energy Healing.
And I'm Elizabeth Maria of Elizabeth Maria Unlimited. And together, we're the hosts of Sex, Drugs, and Spirituality, where we navigate the power of personal growth and self-discovery through exploration and acceptance of our shadow selves. So, this is a pretty interesting topic that we have today, guys. So what is sexual abstinence? So sexual abstinence is the conscious choice to refrain from any type of, well, not any type, but sexual activity in general, and is a concept that has been around for centuries. It's rooted in religious, cultural, and personal beliefs. But beyond just being a choice, it's a lifestyle that carries with it a myriad of complexities and implications. So one common misconception is that sexual abstinence is solely based on religious or moral grounds. And so this can be true for some individuals, but many others choose abstinence for reasons like focusing on personal goals, and of course, avoiding the risks associated with sexual activity, or simply because they haven't found the right partner yet. Another misconception is that people who practice abstinence are somehow missing out on something essential, when in reality, abstaining from sex can be a deliberate and empowering choice that aligns with one's values and priorities. So why do people choose abstinence? So some individuals choose abstinence as a form of self-care and really prioritizing their emotional and mental well-being over physical intimacy. And others may be influenced by factors such as trauma, cultural expectations, or concerns about contraception and sexually transmitted infections, of course. But for some, abstinence serves as a way to explore and understand their own desires and their own boundaries before engaging in sexual activity. So if you are someone out there that is, feeling the energy around wanting to sexually abstain at this time, it's important that you trust yourself and your instincts, okay? So take the time to reflect on your own values, what your priorities are, and what are your reasons for choosing abstinence. And it's also, of course, important to surround yourself with your tribe, supportive people who, respect these choices and that will provide encouragement and, not try to naysay you. And also remember that when practicing abstinence, it's a personal decision, and it is okay and 100% okay to set boundaries about what feels right for you. Okay. And so, and there's a lot of benefits in, making the conscious choice to abstain abstain from sexual activity. And so physically, it can reduce the risk of course, unwanted pregnancies, or I'll say not unwanted, unintended pregnancies, or any type of sexually transmitted diseases. And emotionally, it can produce a deeper connection with yourself. And it can help, kind of usher in a greater sense of self-awareness. And some individuals find that abstaining from sex allows them to focus on their own personal and professional goals without the distractions that come with romantic relationships. And additionally, practicing abstinence can foster a sense of personal empowerment and autonomy over one's own body and choices. So that was a lot of beginning information about what abstinence is and why someone would, want to choose this path. Jackie, what do you think about this?
Yeah, in my personal journey, have not even looked into the thought of abstinence as a way to, foster some of these, beliefs or these benefit from the benefits, I guess, of it. Because I don't know, I kind of feel for me, like my dissociation kept me in almost like a state of abstinence just because I was never really engaged or, present during the act of intimacy, that it was like I wasn't even there anyway. So, from the real sacredness of being intimate with somebody, I don't even, that's kind of how I kind of felt about it. So, it was interesting to see, because I kind of think of men who have such a hard time controlling their libido are very easy to manipulate, because that's like their main focus. So I would think that it would help to benefit a self-control over your mind body, by engaging in practices of abstinence. So yeah, interesting thoughts.
Yeah, it is. And I actually am someone who I was consciously abstinent for 6 years. And I'll say, like, what really resonated with me is that, the reason why I chose abstinence for such a long period of time was because of my past trauma. And, I am definitely, and if you guys have listened to our earlier podcasts, my original sexual trauma happened when I was, still very young. I was like 12. And I went, the route of I just thought that sex was what you did, and so I had many sexual partners. And like Jackie said, I was so disassociated from my body that it really wasn't even about my own, satisfaction or pleasure or a connection of two people. It was just like something that I did because, it was almost like I had been programmed to believe that's what I did.
Yeah.
And so fast forward until my mid 30s, and when my daughter, she was about 10 or 11 and was getting close to the age that I was. And that was when I began to really do some more inner work around this, around my original trauma. I mean, even that was actually like when I first began remembering it in detail, and I was like in my mid 30s. And I remember and I know that I've talked about this in previous episodes, but it was obviously a huge turning point for my spiritual development. But I found myself like in my car driving around Atlanta, like cussing out men and telling them that that I was gonna kill them if they came close to my daughter. And I mean, I thought I was going crazy. I like literally. Yeah. And I talked to, the woman that I was working with at the time, and she was the one that was able to say, oh, isn't your daughter getting to the age that you were? And it was just, I mean, such an it was like one of the huge like aha moments, and beginning to see like my patterns and stuff. And so, and during this time I was doing a 12-step program, and and in most 12-step programs, they suggest that you stay abstinent for the first year,
Yeah.
or just while you're,
Yep.
integrating these new coping strategies and whatnot. And so I was already pretty much doing that. But psychologically, I feel that emotionally that I had really resorted back to that, that small, vulnerable little girl. And I was like unable to even, look, like if I thought that a guy was good looking, I could barely even talk to them. I just would like giggle and like leave the room really fast.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I
so-
think about this. Like, first, I believe you should have like a really strong, healthy understanding of what proper sexual desire and connection is before
Yes.
you can then want to maybe utilize these abstinent practices for a beneficial reason. But I think if you
Absolutely.
don't actually have that first positive understanding,
Yeah.
abstinence just kind of seems like, I'm not even there anyway. I was abstinent in my mind because I was so disconnected from the body that it was kind of like, it's been 41 years I've been abstinent. It's like, it's time.
Right.
Yes. To have
was-
that, at least that feeling, because I do understand that a lot of people are using it for spiritual practices, and there's some real positive stuff to it. And I did take some time to kind of look at some of the reasons why individuals use this on their spiritual side of things, which we'll kind of get into if you kind of thought we should move in that direction now.
Yeah. I did want to say that I agree with you, Jackie, that, because when I, was consciously abstinent for that 6 years, it really was more me, like I wasn't integrating, those energies in. It was almost like from a fear-based,
like avoidance
and,
more, right?
like
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that makes sense to me because that is a pattern, right? Especially because, and that's what I feel like, because you never had that one experience or that, understanding of that solid, what real sensual connection is with another individual. And so you're abstaining from something that wasn't right to begin with.
Exactly. And, I did learn a lot from that period. And in retrospect, it was important for my spiritual evolution. But
6 years is a long time. I gotta say, like, I've always been a relationship person. So yeah, there was always this consistency of sex, whether my mind and body were there at all. But yeah, 6 years. I mean, wow, that's a long time.
It was. I think I had enough.
Were you like facilitating releasing that energy in a healthy, like, how is that energy being released then for you in your sense?
Well, and that's the thing. And really that goes back to the quote, like it was really about me repressing that energy instead of, and so that's why when I did begin to have sex again, that I immediately went down, kind of the rabbit hole of abusive, like fucked up relationships, because I wasn't integrating that energy. I was repressing it, and so in retrospect, I see that, but I'm definitely someone who's an experiential learner.
But that's how you learn. I'm not the same way.
Mhm.
That, like, some people have to learn the hard way. And I guess that is what brought us to where we are right now. So it, our awareness has given us that hindsight view of it all. But yeah, it had to be done that way. Like, otherwise it wouldn't have been integrated the way it is now. So
exactly. So
wow, that's interesting. So I mean, like I said, took some time to research other reasons why people would be abstaining from sex, and culture and religion within the spiritual community as well plays a big part into it. So when you're thinking about coming from purity and a wholeness, there are tons of spiritual traditions that emphasize the importance of abstinence. And it's seen as a way to maintain this pure state of your mind, body, and spirit. And it will benefit you in many ways because it allows you to focus on your spiritual development and your connection to the divine without being complicated by sexual relationships. Something that you kind of already touched on in the beginning part of our show was the control and discipline that you can by abstaining from sex. So it really does have this way of, I don't know, especially control, right? Mastery over your own desires, your own impulses, you're strengthening your willpower and your character. And I'll touch back on this here towards the end because I have an interesting little tidbit for you guys from the male perspective a little bit. But there are practices that believe that you can go into transcendence from, you know, utilizing the sexual desire, and it will start to advance your spiritual growth and lead you to enlightenment, so that it really allows you, some people believe, to hit these higher states of consciousness and spiritual awareness, so you can start to really utilize that life force energy, which is just this ultimate powerful sexual sensual energy, as we were talking about. So respect for the sacredness of sexuality is another reason that somebody might want to abstain from sex, and really reserving sex as a way for procreation within marriage. And if you start to abstain from sex outside of these contexts, it would be beneficial as a way to honor and respect the sanctity of the sexual expression. One popular way, and I'm sure everybody already knows about this, is spiritual vocation. And this would be for celibacy, such as traditions, monks, nuns. Christianity is prominent in, you know, their priests or their, I think they're called priests, or they're rabbis, or not rabbis. I think rabbis too, but I mean, abstaining from sex outside of that. So, I mean, obviously we know about all of that. We don't have to get too much into that, but energy conservation is if you could utilize your sacred sexuality for some spiritual practices. We'll teach you yoga and tantric yoga, especially. We already touched on that in a previous episode. And it's really just to be this potent force that can be transformed to controversing your energy into enlightenment. So you're really channeling that desire, that sacred sexual energy up your midline of your chakras to really expand your consciousness. And this is done in numerous different spiritual practices and initiations as well, for, you know, shamanic traditions, as well as different indigenous traditions also was really use abstinence as a part of preparation for these initiations to higher realms and astral traveling, etc. So there's numerous ways people facilitate that, but there really is an importance that we want to mention is that this is a very personal choice that people make if they're going to choose to embark on a practice of abstinence. And it's really influenced by your own beliefs and your own values. So it's important for individuals to explore what their motives are as to why they would be interested in approaching a state of abstinence. And you really want to do it with mindfulness and a respect for your mind, your body, and where you are within your own journey. Like Elizabeth says, she has some challenges the first time that she went about this path. This is not something that I have any experience with myself, but just really understanding why you might want to be going on this direction. So I took some time to speak to a great friend of mine, Cortez Medford, and you guys should know him from, if you follow any of my stuff, I was on his radio station, Kind of Sound Radio, out of the UK, and I'll link him up in the description box below. But he has a lot that he talks about on the male side of things. So the benefits of semen retention. And I was really excited to kind of talk to him about some of the stuff that he really openly shares on his channel. So we dove into what semen retention is, and he shared his belief that semen retention isn't just about the physical substance, but it actually holds the essence of a man's vitality and its vital source of energy. And it was really an interesting discussion because he explained how keeping the life force within your body has a positive impact on a man's physical health. And it'll help with your mental clarity and your overall well-being. But Cortez, his perspective was kind of opened me up to a whole new way of thinking about masculinity and the importance of understanding your connection to your body. So I asked him to give us kind of a brief description on what semen retention is, and if he could give us a little bit more of a better understanding of what it is. So I'm going to read it verbatim, guys. So, you know, I'm not the best at reading verbatim off a script, but I asked Cortez what semen retention is, and his response is semen retention is an ancient spiritual practice that entails to hold on to your seminal fluids and transmute those fluids into sexual energy, integrate that into other aspects of your life, which you want to see grow and blossom. So what he is saying is that there will be no porn, no touching yourself, and you can have sex, but you have to have zero ejaculation. Oh my gosh, I have never been with somebody who has had sex and like if they didn't ejaculate, they get so angry. But he says by doing this, but if you can do it, and he's done it, so we're definitely gonna have to talk more. But I mean, he says by doing so, if you practice it correctly and for the right reasons, you will watch relationships, your money, your work, and everything in your life become so much better and reaffirmed and matched for you. And if you can then learn to master your sexual energy, this will allow you to retain your life force, which is your energy, your semen, and you start to become a different person. You will start to walk, talk, and feel differently, even look differently, because your energy will be felt and picked up by the collective. So your energy will then start to speak for itself. And if he's saying, sorry, if you've already undertaken this powerful sacred practice, he is challenging everybody out there to try it for 30 days, and you will feel something different in your life. And it really will start to soar you up to the top 5% of men who can harness and channel this energy into some really positive things in their life. And it is such an interesting topic. We're going to need a whole entire show for Cortez to kind of break this one down. But yes, I mean, I don't know a lot of men that could do it. And I would be really actually surprised to, I don't know, see a man who has that kind of control over his sexual desires, because it's not that common in my history, men who would be able to manage this.
Right. I'm thinking balls here. That's what men call it.
I know there's a whole genre of men that created like their thing about like it's like the biggest baby moment, and I've seen grown men like weep.
I know, right?
To be able to express that for themselves openly, like, you know, it's, I don't know. I mean, I'm honestly, if I know a guy like that can manage this, and he does have the ability to control that in the way that he wants it, it puts him up on the notch pole for me, man. I like that. I like a guy with a lot of power, and I'm someone who tries to use situations to my advantage. So if you're weak when it comes to your desire for sex, like, I like that you're a sheep. It's just how it is. Right. I like that. It turns me on when somebody has that level of self-control. Like, man, that means I'm growing up, Elizabeth.
Yes, we both are, darling.
Better. Like, now I'm looking at a controlled man with like, right. Yeah, that's not a red flag. That's a green flag to me.
Yes, it is a green flag now. And, you know, when you were talking about Cortez's, you know, idea around semen retention, it's really kind of hard for me to say that without laughing, you know. Semen
it's not retention. Common. And I have actually sent videos to some people in my life that I feel need to look into this practice.
To practice it.
Yep,
I have
there is. Yeah, I said, you know, have you heard about this amazing thing? Like,
yes.
Check it out.
And I totally love Cortez's work. So guys, if you're listening, or of course you're listening if you're this far in, Jackie will definitely put a link for his services. And while you were talking, Jackie, what it made me think about was the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he actually has a whole chapter on the mystery of sex transmutation. And I think that I know that we will have to do an entire episode just on sexual transmutation. But I wanted to just read a little bit about it because it really goes into this idea of semen retention.
Okay.
And so it says, okay, so the emotion of sex has back of it the possibility of three constructive potentialities. They are: one, the perpetuation of mankind; two, the maintenance of health as a therapeutic agency. It has no equal, right? So it definitely can relax you. And three, the transformation of mediocrity into genius through transmutation. And so he goes on to say, sex transmutation is simple and easily explained. It means the switching of the mind from thoughts of physical expression to thoughts of some other nature. And he says that sex desire is the most powerful of human desires. And so it makes sense that by harnessing this energy and directing it towards other, energetic things that you want to align with can help propel you, like Cortez was saying,
I feel like
money.
and I honestly believe that to be true. It is the essence of life, right? This is
Yes.
our life force, and I believe that it can have some really profound impacts. And actually, as you guys already know, I'm exploring this for myself, just understanding, first of all, how to integrate the energy I'm feeling in that sense after a life of trauma. And
Right.
I'm really interested in this topic.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that, as we move forward in our podcast, I keep on saying I think when really I know, but as we move forward in the podcast, we definitely will delve more into this topic by having a whole episode with Cortez. And then I would love for us to really just pick apart this chapter and Think and Grow Rich.
I think so. And it really is, because I feel how strongly that energy is with me in my body, like that. I don't necessarily yet know how to transmute it into what I'm looking for. And that's kind of like the cusp of where I'm at right now. And as you were reading through some of that stuff, it really does open my mind to the possibility of using that for spiritual advancement. And
yes,
learning really how to focus and harness that, because it's incredibly powerful. Like it was almost overwhelming to me when those emotion or those physical sensations, I guess I would say, started to come back in a real way. And it was, the integration process has been a little challenging because I don't have a frame of reference.
Right. And I think that was also, the reason why I was repressing it for so long, but now that I know, it was like I had to go to like both extremes, 6 years of total abstinence. And then, the last 7 years have been me like really, walking through my shadows with, and learning about, just cultivating the energy of self-worth and the belief that, my body is a sacred temple. And I had to go to some really dark places in order, to see what I didn't want. And so now I feel, like you said, that I'm integrating these new energies and, really working on finding a balance within, my own sexuality. But
balance, that really speaks to me. I feel like it is a balance, a balancing game, right? With the emotional body, your mental body, like, the triangle with kind of the whole mind, body, spirit balance. Well, yeah.
So moving forward, and thinking about some different perspectives around this topic, is abstinence necessary for a spiritual path? And, you touched on some of the spiritual traditions. I know that, initiation into, like becoming a yogi, that they really focus on harnessing that those energy points and, and through abstinence, conscious abstinence, being able to really come into that spiritual awareness, but is it necessary? And so I did a little research on this topic and came up with Rushi Thaw. Let's see, it's Thawa, I think is how you pronounce her last name. Sorry if you're listening. She is a spiritual mentor, and in an article that I was reading from medium.com, she discusses how spirituality is union with life, not exclusion. And she discusses that spiritual development is an internal journey, and all external activities done with presence are part of that spiritual development. And so this really goes back to, that 6 years for me repressing it. It was like I wasn't ready to look at it. I wasn't ready to really, develop in that area. And so I had to just kind of withstand. But like we've discussed in previous episodes, the spiritual journey is about awareness, presence, and, that non-attachment, that expectation to outcome. So from this perspective, being present and mindful about sexual intimacy is the main key, right? And as Thawa says, it is not sex that acts as the impediment to spiritual growth. It is compulsiveness and attachment towards it, right? And so, again, feeling the need for it and having this expectation to the outcome, the idea of being in kind of a fantasy world about like what the sexual experience is going to be without being in that presence, and truly honoring one's body, mind, and spirit. And, like you were saying, Jackie, about your journey, I really feel that not only did I become like a master at disassociation, but I numbed my body, with alcohol and other drugs for so long. And I mean, it came a time when I couldn't even have sex without these exterior substances aiding me, because I
you
was
link
so
it together. And when it comes to addiction, how quickly you can link together that pathway where it just all falls into place. You start at even locations, like you start at a bar you are always at, right? It's so quickly how that becomes a pattern, and they are so linked together, and unwinding the links, Elizabeth. Woo.
Yes, that's what we're doing, is really creating new neuro pathways, right? And it's such a beautiful experience. But while, we are coming into, this balance of homeostasis and this balance between our mind, body, spirit, right? And going back to this article, she brings up some, ideas about, what can happen to kind of the and the imbalance of this by forcing abstinence, just for exterior reasons. So she points out to this idea of toxic spiritual superiority. And so, and guys, and I joke, I'm like, watch out on these spiritual streets, man, because not all that shines is golden, right? And so some people can abstain from sex, masturbation as a way, not just to feel control over their own body, but to feel superior, and with other people, right? And so, it's kind of like that self-righteous indignation, right? Like, well, I am so spiritual and balanced.
Sitting on your spiritual high horse.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I ain't got no time for that kind of energy.
No.
And,
judgment does not have a place in the spiritual community. And if it sounds like judgment, if it feels like judgment, that's not
judgment.
Yes. Judgment. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had several girlfriends have experiences with quote unquote spiritual leaders that were, you know, really this toxic spiritual superiority.
Yep.
So, you know, for those of you that are listening, I mean, really, you know, listen to your heart and gut when choosing to, you know, who you're going to work with, because it is a
It
real thing.
is. And now we're talking about we could be very easily re-traumatized by engaging with the wrong people in this type of work. And
Yes,
that's the biggest thing, you guys. Like, we should be at a point where we are really aware of how we feel so that we are understanding who can benefit us on this journey. You will feel it. You will know. Like, there is very often not a time that I knew way ahead of time about people. Like, I chose to ignore things I should not have. And that's on me. But now that we have the awareness, it's up to us to choose the right people for us. And we can do it alone. Like, I'm doing it alone. So, like,
yes.
there's a little bit.
And I mean, yeah, and I mean, you know, I do say it takes a village, and that, you know, cultivating your spiritual tribe and community. But you know, take your time, and it's absolutely better to do it alone than to get re-traumatized by working with someone who really doesn't have your best interest. I mean, they just want followers to, you know, kind of pump up their own spiritual ego or whatever. But you know, and we already talked about this, but she also focuses on forced suppression can lead to inner resistance. And really, I feel like this is what happened to me. You know, like I forced, you know, or, you know, dismissing that sexual part of me, that when I did let it out, there was so much resistance around it that I just went down the rabbit hole into like a hellish landscape of like a perverted, and I don't mean that like being a pervert, but it was like a perverted sense of what sexual energy is. And so because you're working on the fit, so this idea of sexual repression is that, you know, it's someone who's really working on the physical, which again, that's what happened to me, instead of working on the inner first, right? And so guys, it is an inside job, and what we see on the, you know, as we heal on the inside, right, then we begin to see, you know, this shift on the outside. So it's not, you know, trying to find the perfect partner, the perfect job, the perfect house, right? It's we do the inner work. We have to release that energy. And so without meditativeness, you know, and awareness, right, like celibacy or, you know, forced abstinence, it will just make you feel miserable and like you're outside of, you know, just the experience in general, instead of learning how to integrate the energies in a healthy and balanced way. So
that one speaks to me so much, because that's exactly what's happening to me on my journey now that these feelings are starting to come back. And I have been kind of exactly integrating it, because I feel like, you know, if it wasn't to happen this way and I still wasn't, you know, I guess more healed, I would have just feel like I couldn't handle it. Like, it would be too much for my body to understand where to put all that. And I can see how in an unhealed state, drinking and drugs would be like my immediate go-to, because it was such a unsettling, out of control experience.
Yes, exactly.
So
And so
mindfulness, like you said.
Yeah, it is all about mindfulness and awareness of, you know, where you're at in your journey, you know. And so I feel that being abstinent, you know, it does have a place within spiritual development, 100%. But, you know, and I mean, honestly, like any type of spiritual tool, if you will, you know, really look at you know, the reasons why, you know, why that this is coming to you as a, you know, as a step in your evolution. You know, is it that you're repressing it? And if so, then, you know, that is a key to really go within and do that work, right? And just kind of, sticking your head in the sand, so to speak, right? But if it is, like we talked about, like with Cortez's ideas of spirit of semen retention, and how we touched on Napoleon Hill with sexual transmutation, then I believe that really harnessing that energy and being able to direct it in different ways can be a very important tool for spiritual evolution.
I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't say if this will come up on my journey going forward, but definitely interested in understanding how to utilize that energy to assist in my spiritual development. I think that really stuck out to me on the topics that we discuss, and how powerful that energy is when you really can feel that, the power of it all. So honestly, I'm interested in this topic going further, and I think we'll definitely be continuing on this path and understanding really how to harness the power of our own sexuality and our sacred energy. Thank you all for joining us as we discuss the sexual abstinence for the mind, body, spirit development. We would love to hear your comments and perspectives on our show, and they're so important to us. So we would love for you guys to reach out. If you do have questions or topics for us to use on our show, our email address is sexdrugsandspiritualitypodcast@gmail.com. So please send us that information. We hope to hear from each and every one of you.
Yeah, and if you'd like to contact us about our individual client offerings, please click the link in our description and be sure to mention that you heard about us on Spotify. And we look forward to connecting with you all, our spiritual community, at 11 p.m. EST every Saturday on Spotify, to explore and integrate the shadow side of our reality.
Love and light.
And light, guys. Bye.
Sex, Drugs, and Spirituality Podcast. Elizabeth Maria, Unlimited LLC. And Jackie Lyons of Akashic Energy Healing is not responsible nor liable for any advice, course of treatment, diagnosis, or any other information, services, or products that you obtain through this website.